1 second. Chaya, Bat Simcha. Bat Simcha.
So I see I didn't scare you all off last week. I'm surprised. Tonight's talk is Chaya Sarah. So let's just do a 2-minute recap of last week, and then we're going to go a little bit further. So last week, we discussed a greater awareness of what it means HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what it means HaKadosh Baruch Hu is infinite, what it means HaKadosh Baruch Hu is everywhere. We talked about the fact that everything is an emanation, everything is a manifestation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is everything. Everything exists as a ray of the sun, as an emanation of an infinite force. We spoke about the prevalence of stress and anxiety and worry. And we want to come back now, and before we go further, we just want to understand how what we learned last week actually changes how we feel about situations. When we are stressed, when we're worried, when we're anxious, most oftentimes it's because we feel alone. One of the greatest challenges of being a human being is loneliness. We can be married, we can have children, we can even have a best friend. But oftentimes we still feel alone. We feel that people don't understand us. Sometimes we're afraid to share what we're going through. We don't think that people can appreciate what it is we're going through, how we're feeling. The Gemara is known to have said that Tzara derabim chatzi nechama. When people go through a tzara in a group, it's a half of a consolation. It's not because we feel good that other people are suffering. It's because it takes away that loneliness factor. Half of most of what we experience is deep loneliness. When we feel lonely, it's because we are completely disconnected. Because at the time that we feel all alone, we are actually being enveloped. We are actually being infused with life and vitality and the power to think and the power to exist by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's there. He not only knows the problem, he created the problem. He and only he has the power of the solution. But we live in such a state of disconnection that we live in this small, constricted, black place, and we think that in that place we're all alone. What we learned last week should give us a completely different perspective of reality. And in reality, it's not possible to be alone. It's not possible to actually be disconnected. We might be disconnected in our minds. It's no different than a fan who doesn't realize it's plugged into the power grid. It thinks it runs by itself, but the reality is you pull that plug out, it's over, it doesn't run. We are plugged in. For if we were not plugged in, we would be nothingness. We wouldn't be here. So, we're going to take this idea a little bit further. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a name. Many names. We refer to these names. Shem Hashem, Yud Hey and Vav Hey, the Shem of Chesed. It's a beautiful name. There's a name that's quite misunderstood. We call Hashem Makom. HaMakom Yinachem Etchem. HaMakom Yirachem Aleichem. What does that mean? HaMakom, the place. So Gemara tells us, Hu Mikomo Shel Olam, Ve'eno Olam Mikomo. Hashem is the place of the world, and the world is not his place. Meaning, everything exists in space. Our idea of nothingness, when we say in the beginning of Bereshit that there was Tohu and Vohu, and the commentaries say there was nothingness. To us, nothingness is empty space. That's what we think. Empty space is nothingness. But that's not even true. Nothingness is there isn't even space. Space itself is a creation. Right? We all exist in space. We take up space. If space weren't here, nothing could exist. Nothing. Utter nothingness. We cannot comprehend utter nothingness. When we call Hashem HaMakom, what we're saying is that we all exist in a place called Makom. And that place itself is a Kadosh Baruch Hu. That place itself is a creation. And in that place, we all exist. And when we think about the name HaMakom, when we think all alone, when we think that we are disconnected, we should remind ourselves that we exist inside of a place called Makom. And in that place, we are utterly connected. Absolutely, utterly connected. So, the first idea, which everybody should do 3 times a day, is when you say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And we spoke last week about the idea that Echad means that there is only Hashem. It's not that there's one Hashem, that everything is Hashem. When we say Shema Yisrael, we are meant to connect to that idea, Hashem Echad. It's almost like feeling like the ray of the sun and allowing yourself to be consumed back up into the sun. In the words of the Zohar, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, is called Yichida Ila'ah. Yichida means uniqueness, Echad. Ila'ah means to elevate, to bring up. Literally, we close our eyes and we allow ourselves to become nullified and nothing, consumed back into our sources. This is what we said last week, why there's this great skula of Ein Od Milvado. Because in that place, evil cannot exist, pain cannot exist, anxiety cannot exist. In that pain, in that place, there's only the light, the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Every single person can do this 2 or 3 times a day for no more than 20 to 30 seconds. And it literally melts away everything. And you can do this whenever you find yourself in a place where your stomach is in knots, your mouth is dry, your hands are shaking, you have trepidations. You just close your eyes, you take a deep breath, and you focus on Hashem Echad in Od Milvado. You don't do it with your brain, you do it with your entire being, you do it with your heart. You are saying, Hashem, I am nothing, you are everything. And with that, it melts away. Let's take this a step further. The Pasuk starts in Bereshit with the creation of man, with the Kadosh Baruch Hu forming flesh. Adam was made out of the four elements, Afar ve'Adama. Vayifach ba'apa nishmat chayim. Hashem blew into him a neshama of life. We all have a neshama. We believe that whether we received our neshama after 40 days in our mother's womb, whether we received the neshama when we were born, some say we receive a higher neshama when we become bat mitzvah and bar mitzvah. We get this thing, and it's ours. It's ours. And we hold it until we give it back. Neshama shenasat bi, tahora hi, bata asid lach, bitla mimeni ulachsira bi lasad lavo. However, it's not true. Baal Shem Tov tells us in one of the famous verses in the Ma'aseh Merkava, on which most of Kabbalah is built, the pasuk says, "V'chayot ratzol b'shov." The chayot, they ran and they returned. They ran and they returned. Tells us the Baal Shem Tov that the neshama of a person leaves them every second. Each time we exhale, our neshama returns to its source, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu breathes it back into us. The great Rabbi Yitzchak of Berditchev says, this is the greatest chesed of Hashem, because the neshama wants to go back to where it came from. It doesn't want to stay in this world. It doesn't want to stay in a body of flesh, certainly one that isn't pure. The only exclusion to this rule is Medrash tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama refused to leave him. There's a whole Medrash, a beautiful Medrash, how Kadosh Baruch Hu coaxes Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama to leave. But our neshama, it knows there's better places to be than in this world. And as Kadosh Baruch Hu forces the neshama back into us, every single breath we take. This is why the word neshima, which means breath, and the word neshama, which means soul, are exactly the same words. With breathing, we bring back our neshama. In other words, just as the world is constantly recreated every second by Hashem infusing it with vitality and life, as we said last week, our life force, our neshama, is there every second. It's as though we're getting mouth-to-mouth resuscitation every split second of our lives from HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. And yet, we feel alone. And yet, we feel disconnected. And yet, we feel as separate entities from our very life force. So we go back, and we don't need to do much more but to close our eyes, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about this next week, but to start to focus on our breath. It is a famous meditation exercise to focus on breath, and people mistakenly think that this is a Hindu culture idea. Avodah Zarah, I've heard people say, it's ludicrous. It's brought down in Abulafia, it's brought down in the Baal Shem Tov. The great Rabbi of Mizrich talks about it, that a person should focus on their breath and try to connect to the idea of HaKadosh Baruch Hu giving them the neshama, giving it back, giving it and giving it back. You can take this idea a little bit further, because we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu when He takes His neshama, our neshama, in our exhale, to give it back more infused with life and vitality that we gave it. We can give it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu full of all of the stuff that we carry, and we can take it back completely purified and clean. So, let's walk away from this idea now, and let's go a little bit further. The Chovot HaLevavos tells us that there are 7 attributes that one would need to find in another in order to rely and trust upon them. The foundation of menuchat hanefesh, peace of mind, tranquility, a life free of anxiety, is not just connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but also understanding our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and how HaKadosh Baruch Hu feels about us. And the Chovot HaLevavos tells us that there's 7 things that somebody would require something else to have to feel peaceful, tranquil, relaxed, that all will be good as long as I'm in their hands. And the first is love. We have to feel loved. You have to feel loved. Love, the reason why we have to feel love is, number one, it's the greatest motivator for somebody to help us. Right? People will go to extremes to help the person that they care about. The second reason is what we said before. We feel connected, we feel understood by those that love us. Tells us the Chovot HaLevavos that there is nothing and will ever be anything that loves us the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu does. A lot of people don't believe that. At the root of a lot of people's stresses is they actually believe that Chas v'Shalom, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is out to get them. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is angry at them. Maybe it's their fault. Maybe they'll admit to that. Maybe it's not. Maybe they're bitter. Maybe they think that they got a raw deal. And they don't appreciate that if HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't love them, they would not exist. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not bring people into this world to make them suffer needlessly. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not need to create this world. All love that we know is conditional and selfish. All human-to-human love, the Chovot HaLevavos tells us, is always built on either a condition that as long as these conditions are met, that love will exist, or I receive something from you and that's why I love you. Even a parent, says the Chovot HaLevavos, the closest we have to the Shekhinah and the love to the Shekhinah is the love of a mother to a child. Because a mother's love is completely instinctive and it's complete. But, as we know, it's oftentimes conditional. And there are things that children can do to diminish that love and sometimes, unfortunately, sever it completely. A mother loves a child because the child is an extension of her. A mother loves a child because it's instinctive for her to do so. She's compelled to do so. When a mother gives birth to a child and sees that child for the first time, she will do anything in the world for that child, even though she has absolutely no idea who this child is, how it will turn out or she'll turn out, whether this child will give you the greatest nachat or chas v'shalom or otherwise. And the reason, says the Chovot HaLevavos, is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu infused a mother with an instinctive love to take care of this child, to baby this child, to diaper this child, and feed this child, because otherwise the human race could not exist. But the mother's compelled to do so. And even a compelled love is not in any way, shape, or form resembling what HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love is for us. Because Baruch was not compelled to love us. Because Baruch was not compelled to create us. Because Baruch is the only representation of true, pure, unconditional love. Our definition of love is that this person makes me feel good. This person does what I want them to do. This person promotes what I see as good and beneficial. And we know that many times that's to the detriment of the other person. Right? The word chesed, it's a beautiful word, chesed, right? It's a beautiful word. It means expansion, when a person gives to another. Beautiful word. But in the Torah, one of the greatest sins is labeled chesed. Yeah. A relationship between siblings that's not allowed to be is called chesed. A boy and a sister who have narrow relations is called chesed. What does that mean? Chesed. Chesed. Terrible thing. And the answer is that chesed that isn't contained can lead to terrible things. Meaning, why not? All people are the same. This was the hippie movement of the 60s. Just people did whatever they wanted. The world's a great place. It's a free-for-all. We need Buddha on the other side. We need restraint. If mother and a father spoil a child rotten, this child will suffer for the rest of his life. Not only will the child suffer, his grandchildren will suffer. When you spoil a child, when you don't teach a child boundaries, when you don't know how to say no, when your child pushes you around and you just give and give and give and think that this is the definition of love, you're creating a monster. And one day that child will turn around and hate that parent and say, you ruined me. You destroyed me. Children need boundaries. Children need no. Children need to be angry at you. If you're a parent and your child's not angry at you once in a while because you said no, because you sent them to the room, it's very hard to say no to a child. But that's what true love is. That's absolute true love. But as humans, we oftentimes just don't get that right. Yet, we still define love by that. This person just does and gives and is always there for me, and it's a wonderful thing. But what's if the person says no? What's if the person says, no, I want you to do this on your own. I want you to stand on your own 2 feet. It's about time you made something of yourself. Starting next week, you're not getting a penny from me. You hate that person. You're mean. You're terrible. I thought you loved me. How could you do that to me? But when we're in our right minds, we know ultimately what's best for us is not always what right? It's not what we want at the moment. Well, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't work that way. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't work with our definitions of love. When we say HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us, we're saying that He really loves us. And that if I'm going through something right now that I wish would come to an end, and I think it's because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is out to get me, and I don't appreciate that that's not possible. It's not possible that that which I am is... I'm not out to get myself. Sometimes, unfortunately, people even turn upon themselves. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is even a deeper aspect of who I am than who I think I am. So how could that thing is that I have to recount loves me. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love is unconditional. The Horowitz tells us there's nothing we can do. There's no sin we can possibly commit that will sever that love. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love is not because Kadosh Baruch Hu wants to get nachat from us. Parents, the Chavak Levavos tells us, they get something out of their children. Their children make them proud. Wow, your son, he's amazing. Your daughter, she's incredible. Makes you feel good. It's an incredible thing. I feel good. Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need to feel good. Kadosh Baruch Hu lacks nothing. He doesn't need us to do anything for him. Nothing at all can we do for HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he lacks. Yet he loves us anyway. He gives us life and vitality. That is love. And any love that exists in the world, says the Chavak Levavos, is only because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wills it to be there. A mother loves a child because HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you will love your child. A husband and wife have relations and rapport and respect and love for each other because HaKadosh Baruch Hu infuses that house. Shechina shrui b'neihem. That's what the glue is. Because otherwise, love is also a creation that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says should exist or should not exist. Down and enumerates how many times in their lives HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed us He loves us. Every single person has had instances and moments where they felt completely embraced and loved. Thousands of them. But it's no different than a child. When mommy or tati doesn't give him what he wants, and he says, you hate me, you're so mean, you never give me what I want. And the mother says, how can you say that? Look at you, I nursed you. You live in our house. You're wearing our clothing that we paid for. You're about to get on a school bus for tuition that we pay. We sent you to summer camp. We take you to the doctor. We stay up night. At that moment, that child thinks about nothing other than that moment. And that child feels unloved. That's called katnus. Katnus means immaturity. A place of small-mindedness. You think we outgrow this? Do you think that we ever outgrow this childishness? We don't. Things could go our way for 6 months, and we take it for granted. Because life should be great. So I don't need to be excited when life is great because that's what it should be. Right? I'm entitled to it. I deserve it. Right? This is what life should be. And then all of a sudden, something's not so good. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is waking us up and saying, hey, you forgot about me. You think this is the default path of life. Everything just goes, right? And then all of a sudden, we're like, what happened? Last 6 months. It's forgotten. It's absolutely forgotten. I don't even remember. So what do I do? Me. What do I do? Maybe I'm the only one here that's prone to this, but I am. Take notes. Lots of notes. Keep them in my phone. The first of the 7, Hashem loves me. How do I know Hashem loves me? I have entries there that are endless. Endless. Starting from when I was a child. Things that I remember. And I keep updating it. Constantly. And when I'm feeling like the world is crashing in, I just open up my phone. And I say, Hashem loves me. And I remind myself, I have 7 healthy children. I have a healthy wife. I have a home. I am healthy. I have great parents. I have friends. I have a brain. I was born a Jew. Seriously. What is the statistical odds that you're in this room right now? Do you know what it is? You have a better chance of being struck by lightning on a clear day than being born a Jew and being an observant one. I'm telling you, look at the odds. Statistically. In my book, I tell a little story one of the famous stories of Naftali of Breslau. There was once a great rabbi who fell into a very deep depression. Very, very deep depression. And he went deeper and deeper into depression and sadness, to the point where literally he couldn't pull himself out. And every time he tried to pull himself out with something, he just found fault in it. Tried to remember the time that maybe he finished the Talmud, and then he said, yeah, but I didn't really know it so well. And then the time he inspired people, and he said, yeah, but I got kavod from it, and I really didn't do it for the right reason. And each time he tried to find something to pull him out, he just went deeper and deeper and deeper, until he had to follow the call. Ani Yehudi. I'm Jew. Shelo asani go. Hashem did not create me a Gentile. And no matter how he tried to find fault with that, he couldn't. Because there's nothing to find fault with, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu created him a Jew. And the story goes that with that thought, he just climbed higher and higher and higher and higher. There's more to the story, but that's not the point. How many times do we actually stop and appreciate what it means to be a Jew? What it means to have a marriage in a world like today, to have children that are respectful, to have a purpose and meaning in your life, to be able to walk into a magnificent edifice like this and leave infused and refreshed and connected and uplifted in a world where people are literally turning to everything in the world to just distract themselves from their problems. And we have a Torah, we have a Sefer Torah, we have holiness, we have nachat, things that are just unbelievable. Shabbat. I always said, somebody knocked on my door one day and said, hey, listen, I want to tell this to you. You're not who you think you are. Your name is John Smith. They swapped you in the nursery. You're a goy. I keep Shabbat. I have to do one malacha because otherwise I get stoned. But would I give up Shabbat? If I didn't have to keep Shabbat, would I do anything different? I would do every single thing. I'd see this Miron. I go to shul. I do everything. I would never open my phone. A day without a phone, it's the greatest invention in the world. I would do the same thing. And guess what? I do everything else as well. Because what a life we have. It's unbelievable. How many times do we stop and realize who gave us this? We could be like everybody else. Because Baruch Hu didn't love me when I be me. Do we appreciate who we are and what we have? How many times do we think about that? Is it in your phone? Are there bullet points of what is the difference between you and them? You need to constantly remind yourself that HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if you do that, it's not possible for you to feel alone and frustrated and angry. Because Baruch Hu has something against you and He gave you that list. I don't know. My enemies don't. Somebody who's not looking out for my best interest could not have possibly delivered all that on a silver platter. But when we're not remembering that, of course we feel it here. Of course we're disappointed and angry and frustrated and alone and hopeless. But it's right there in front of our eyes if we just open them and see it. I'm going to read you the words of the Tanya. Chapter 32. Person wants to have true joy, inner joy. Befrat in times when we require clarity and tranquility. He should deepen his thoughts and try to visualize the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how he fills all worlds, upper and lower, even this world in which we reside. And only he permeates everything. And that at this moment, he and only he is here giving me everything that I have. The Horowitz says that whenever there's a giver and a recipient, the magnitude of the recipient's pleasure and appreciation is dependent on how far apart the giver is from the recipient. What does that mean? So you have a guy, a homeless man laying in the street, right? And he's freezing. He's freezing. And the homeless guy in the box next to him gives him a pair of gloves. Thank you, Joe. You're a sweetheart. I really appreciate it. But it's a 3. His hands are warm now. Now let's imagine it's not the guy next to him. It's some passerby. Good Samaritan walks by, sees this man on the street, and he says, "Sir, you look cold. Would you like a pair of gloves?" "Thank you. That's so kind of you." And he takes the pair of gloves. It's a 4. Now let's imagine Jamie Dimon, the CEO of J.P. Morgan, comes out of his office, gets about to get into his limo, and he sees a guy laying on the street. And he says, "Sir, are you cold?" "Because I'm freezing." He says, turns to the limo driver, "You got a pair of gloves?" He goes, "Yeah. Leather ones with fur inside." Give them to this man. "Oh my gosh, Jamie Dimon just gave me a pair of gloves." Imagine it's the mayor. The mayor gives him a pair of gloves.
Which man?
I don't want to say it. Notice I left the name out. And when I get the president, I'm leaving his name out too.
But we're happy with Jamie Dimon than the mayor.
Let's imagine in the times when there were kings, that the king is riding by on a chariot. And he stops, and there's a man laying in the street in a box. And he gets out of his chariot and he hands him a pair of gloves. It's the same pair of gloves. You understand? It's the same pair of gloves. What difference does it make? My hands are warmer if the king gave me the gloves? No. Because this person, who is so far above me, took the time to actually reach down to me, my lowly self, laying in a box, and handed me a pair of gloves. It's not the gloves. He gave me me. He gave me decency and respect. He gave me a sense of self. I'm valuable. I mean something to somebody. And to him, he took the time. It's amazing. Listen to the words of the Tanya. HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes. Says, Melech Gadol, great king, V'rov Mara, great statue. He comes and he finds a man, a heap of garbage, Menuvel umutul ba'ashpa, V'yorel b'mkaim kevodo. He comes out of this with his whole entourage. And they pick him up out of the garbage dump. chamber. Mecheder Mokum Shein Kol Eved B'Sar Nichnas L'Sham. A place where nobody's allowed. U'misyached im Misham B'yichud B'Kerev Amitui. He cleans the man up. Clothes him. B'chibuk V'nishuk. He kisses him and hugs him. B'chol Lev V'nefesh. How will this person feel? Exactly these words. And even more than that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for us when he came into Mitzrayim. A whole day we talk about Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim's a big deal. Right? Mitzrayim's a big deal. Zeichel Etzias Mitzrayim. Well, when I'm Mitzrayim. What do I do? Seriously, what does that have to do with you? Tells us the timeline. What was Mitzrayim? It's exactly what it was. It's exactly what it was. We were in the 49th level of Tumah. We were forlorn, we were hopeless, we were forgotten. And the Melech Malchi HaMelachim said, he said this on whole Pesach night, and himself, and he didn't send Malachim, and he didn't tell anything, he just sent us and us and us. And he came and he took us. The Melech Malchi HaMelachim, we're talking about a physical king. Here we're talking about the infinite creator. And he comes down into this world and he takes us out from the heap of the garbage and he elevates us 49 days later when we receive the Torah. And we become the children. How much love. And this is our life. When we realize what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, and when we realize who we are, and the infinite difference, the vast chasm between us, and yet HaKadosh Baruch Hu was giving me everything. How am I supposed to feel? I'm supposed to feel so loved. I can't believe it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu and me? I'm not a tzaddik. It's just me. And he's giving it to me. And no matter what garbage we're laying in, whatever we have done, we are guaranteed that that connection will always be there. We cannot stress this enough and emphasize this enough in our daily routines. If we don't spend 5 minutes a day, a minute here, a minute there, just stopping and closing our eyes, and infusing ourselves with these types of thoughts, stress and anxiety will be our lot. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world that way. That in a state of darkness and disconnection, that's all there is. That's all there is in that place. You cannot find happiness in that. Disconnection and happiness do not go hand in hand. Drugs, they turn to alcohol. All kinds of crazy behaviors to try to distract themselves. The hole and the stress that and they're looking in the wrong places, whether they're Jewish or whether they're not. Because there's only one answer. It's connection. It's dveikut in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it begins with truly infusing ourselves with the idea of love. And today we just spoke about ideas of love. Perhaps next week, we don't really have a lot of time, like 45 more minutes, and there's a lot I want to say, but we'll maybe try to talk about not just thinking these words, but actually visualizing these words, finding visions that we can pull back into our lives to make our hearts understand how much love we actually have. Have a wonderful weekend.
Amen.
שביעית לקודשה וליכוד. והעלה מכל ברכתה אשר אתה תפחתה ונחמתה לברם בעלמא ואלו אמן. על ישראל